It's the Elephant in the Dome, the official podcast of the Washington State Senate Republican Caucus. I'm Tracy Ellis with Senate Republican leader John Braun. You know, for decades, really, Senator, Washington has attracted more people and more income than it has lost. But that trend is reversing now. For the second year in a row, more income has left the state than arrived. And for the third year in a row, IRS data shows Washington is losing more taxpayers to migration than it gains. And with this income tax just passed this year, the governor has yet to sign it, but he's expected to. I would expect that's only going to get worse, right?
Yeah, we have every reason to believe it's going to get worse. Look, the Democrats have had majorities in both chambers of the legislature. This is now the 9th year, and in every year they have put additional taxes in place. In the last 2 years, of course, it's grown almost exponentially with the largest tax increases in our state's history. 2 years in a row now, should the governor sign the income tax, which I agree he likely will do. And I would say it's probably even worse than you're saying, Tracy, because the data we're getting from the Internal Revenue Service is actually a couple years old. So we haven't even seen the results of capital flight from all the taxes last year, from the hike in the estate tax last year, and then of course we have the income tax that is on the books for this year. So I think we are on a steady path to the dismantling of what has been a very strong, very resilient, very good economy here in the state of Washington.
You know, I want to talk about that a little bit. Sometimes when you're in the minority, like Senate Republicans are, you talk about what's wrong a lot. But I know that a lot has gone right in this state, probably not related to politics, but, you know, we have some of the greatest companies in the world, literally, here in Washington State. You know, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, it is a state that has produced a huge amount of good stuff over the years.
Yeah, we've been enormously blessed by the economy here in the state of Washington historically, and I'm super proud. You know, when the Republicans had the majority in the state Senate for 5 years. It's been a little while now, but it was a pretty light touch on the business community, and that was purposeful. I don't think state government hasn't created this economic success, but the light touch, prior to the last 8 or 9 years, really set the conditions, and people from around the state and frankly around the country recognized it as a great place to come and build a business based on workforce, based on economic policy. And they came here, and you can think of industry that's been here a long time, like Boeing or Microsoft, that's been here quite a while. But more recently, of course, Amazon, and then Starbucks was built here, Costco. I mean, the list goes on and on. And what you have to recognize that that's just the ones that are big and well known. There's thousands that are smaller, mid-sized businesses that have historically thrived in Washington State, and frankly are struggling right now, and are either in many cases moving or selling or just closing down. It is. I will tell you, it is much worse than I think we're even seeing in the published reports right now. And this does not spell good things for the future of the state of Washington. It's super frustrating that we came from such a good place in our state, and the Democratic majority, just like I said earlier, they're just dismantling an economy that has served our state and our citizens so well.
Democrats will say, oh, you know, this is budget talk. People don't leave. Research shows, and there is some research that shows that, you know, there isn't always capital flight when you have these types of situations. But, I guess what would you say to that? Democrats really believe that this income tax and these moves that they made, they really believe it's to make the state better and people will want to live here. But you're saying people are leaving. I mean, do we make too much out of this capital flight idea, or is it real, and is it a real serious threat to our state?
Oh, I think it's very real, and it's a very serious threat. They're willfully, I think, ignoring the evidence and also contradictory. I mean, one, I think positive thing out of the session is the Democrats recognized the capital flight they were putting in place with the higher death tax and moved to take it from, by far the highest in the country to just tied with the highest in the country, which is where we've been for some time. So it's really odd that in that case, they say, yeah, that might cause capital flight, but refuse to acknowledge it in other instances. And the data is there. They just don't want to. It's basic economics. These are, and the one thing I do agree with them on is people don't want to leave our state. These companies aren't doing this because they don't love Washington, because they don't, not committed to the state. It's because they have to survive in a national or an international market, and the tax policies and the spending policies put in place by the Democratic majority is making it increasingly impossible for them to survive. So it's a matter of survival if they're going to be competitive in the market. And so they're making the choices. And to say otherwise or to believe otherwise, I think is almost obtuse. They don't want to acknowledge what's directly in front of them.
Well, it's not just rich people, too. I think a lot of times when we talk about this capital flight and people leaving the state, we say it's only rich people. Washington has become the 5th priciest state in the U.S., according to a new report. Yeah. It ranks as the most expensive state in the nation for dining out. Anyone who's eaten out lately can tell you that's true. It's the 2nd priciest for gas, as we've talked about before, the 5th costliest for childcare. So it may not be just millionaires and billionaires who are leaving Washington. Other people may be going to other states as well. And now that, especially people who don't, need to be in office, who can work from home, there's nothing really keeping them here, I guess, except for our beautiful rainy weather.
Yeah. We live in a beautiful state, even if it is a little wet sometimes, and people would stay. But you're 100% right. For every Howard Schultz that makes an announcement and that he's moving to Florida, I bet there's dozens that are just moving. Some of them also, maybe perhaps wealthy, although maybe not that wealthy. But there's a ton of people in my district. I don't live in a very affluent district. I hear from people all the time. Sometimes before they leave. Sometimes I'm like, where did that person go? And nope, they're living in Idaho or Tennessee or Texas or Florida now. And the data supports this. So when you look at migration data over time, not just in Washington, but around the country, people of all income levels have been migrating from income tax states, from high tax states in general, to lower tax states where they can afford to live, live more comfortably without all the additional tax and regulatory expense of Washington state. It's again, this is not unique to Washington, but it's definitely happening in Washington.
Reminder to subscribe to our podcast. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel. And when you head to our website, and we would love for you to do that, the Washington Senate Republican Caucus website, we'd like to hear your story. Are you planning to leave Washington? And go to the Washington State Senate Republican Caucus website. As I said, it'll be prominent. It's called Exit WA. Exit WA. So look for that Exit WA page, and you can tell your story if you're leaving Washington, and read about some of the other people who have left or are planning to leave our state. It is it's kind of a sad thing, because for so many years we were complaining about people moving here. And what's interesting, this IRS data, like you said, is a couple years old, but it shows the people who are still moving to Washington are moving here from California and Oregon. What do they have in California and Oregon? Income tax, right? Yeah. Are those people, listen, if you're in California, cost of living really isn't that much different anymore. We're saying we're the 5th highest in the nation. Or if you're in Oregon, which is about the cost of living is about the same, maybe a little bit less. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, I can move to Washington. Before you said I can move there where they don't have an income tax. Now it's like, well, why move, right? From California or from Oregon to Washington, it's not the same. It doesn't have the same pull as it used to, maybe.
Oh, no, not at all. Well, and in fact, for folks who are are closer to retirement or in retirement. I hear from people who are actually moving to California because they have a higher income tax. They have an income tax now, but they don't have an estate tax, a death tax. So if you're retired and your income is lower, you're living on your retirement savings or however you set up for your retirement, but you're concerned about a death tax. California is it's also a beautiful state. It's warmer, a little drier, at least this time of year, and you don't have to worry about the death tax. So here's the thing: is people make rational decisions. They look at their cost of living, their income, the tax levels, and they make rational decisions. And they think about, do they want to leave their home? Do they want to leave their family? Do they want to leave the life, the community they've worked their whole life in? No, but they also need to be able to afford retirement or afford to keep their business going. So, this is the thing that I think our colleagues on the other side of the aisle discount heavily, is they don't seem to understand it, that regular people make rational decisions. And when you make life unaffordable in Washington, their rational decision, even if they don't want to, is going to be to leave. And that's what we see, frankly, in droves right now in Washington state.
I guess I'm not understanding, and maybe you don't understand either, why Democrats feel this way. We're seeing the numbers, right? So the data, they say that this isn't happening, but these aren't partisan numbers. This is from the IRS. The data shows that this migration is happening. I guess, is it just because they just need the money or feel like they need the money so bad that they just have blinders on when it comes to these stats?
Yeah, I would say a couple things. One is, it's a philosophic difference. They believe, I think they couldn't be more wrong, but they believe that government and government bureaucracy can make better decisions for their money than individual people can. And I think they're entirely wrong, but that's what they believe. So in their minds, taking more money from folks and giving it to government and letting government use it, in their minds more effectively is a good thing. Of course, the data shows just the opposite. It shows, enormous waste in state government and potential for fraud. So people, of all political persuasions don't see it that way, but that's how they see it. Here's the really, the thing they really don't get is a lot of their push is for additional social services. And sometimes I agree with, especially for vulnerable folks. The state of Washington has very generous social services in some cases. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. What they don't seem to get is that was all paid for by our very robust economy. And when they drive this economy out, they're not going to have a choice. They can only solve this problem with more taxes for so long, and then there's nobody else to tax, and that's going to put a real bind on the things that our state has delivered and that they've pushed for over time. They're killing the golden goose, as they say, and that when they do that, the things they claim to protect, the things they claim to value, are going to get undermined in a way I don't think they're going to be too happy about. It's going to be super hard, like decades long, to put it back together when they finally realize they're doing much more harm than good.
You talk to Democrats. Do you think that will happen at some point?
When we finally get to the point, and we're headed at a alarming pace towards this end, when they say, hey, there's no way to pay for these services, we're going to have to make reductions. They've continued to have this discussion where, during the Great Recession, which is now 16, 17 years ago, the state had to make significant reductions in services, and we can't allow that to happen. But rather than hard-nosed, careful budgeting that would preserve services, but at a cost we can afford, they have chosen to just tax more folks. And the end is going to be they can't afford these services. They're going to end up the same spot, only it's going to be even harder to recover next time, is what I worry about. Eventually the pain will change people's decisions. The question is, how much pain will be involved? How many people will leave the state, or how many people who stay here will be hurt because the state can't deliver on its overpromises?
Well, moving forward, what would you tell a person? Well, what do you tell people when they come up to you and say, Senator, I'm sorry, I like Centralia. I've got to go. I can't do this anymore. I mean, do you say, just hold on. Well, I mean, change is coming. Or do you say, yeah, I get you, sorry. I mean, there's nothing I can do about it.
No, I remain hopeful, and I'm certainly not giving up. And I know a lot of good people who aren't giving up. And I understand why people are choosing to leave. I don't like it. I want them to stay and fight and help create a state that we can all prosper in. So my message is still, in spite of the challenges we face, is still one of hope, and that one that requires people to get involved, to share the experiences, to help the folks on the other side there. I don't understand that their very actions, the policies they're putting in place every single legislative session are what's driving, food, gas, housing, childcare, healthcare to be, among the top 5 most expensive in the country. They have to understand from real people, and to do that, real people got to stay and speak up. And I know a lot of people who remain committed to Washington, deeply frustrated, having trouble making ends meet, whether they're in business or just working a job, but yet remain committed. Those folks have to speak up and say, look, the policy being put in place by the majorities is taking us in the wrong direction. Work and hope for a better future.
That's Senator John Braun. I'm Tracy Ellis. This is the Elephant in the Dome, the official podcast of the Washington State Senate Republican Caucus. Please subscribe to this podcast and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you're planning to leave Washington, we'd love to hear your story. Go to the Washington State Senate Republican Caucus website, click on the Exit WA page, and that's where you can tell us your story. Senator Braun will be back with us next week. Have a great day.